Hari Om and welcome to the seminar on the 5 C's of communication. We're going to wait for just a couple minutes while we're joined by more people. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started on the opening prayers. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Welcome to the seminar on the 5 C's of communication. I am going to go ahead and enable the full screen. My name is Sharanya Rao. I'm a professional life coach and a CHIC member. And today we're going to be talking about the 5 C's of communication. Now, if you've previously joined us yesterday on leadership, then this is you'll be familiar with some of the C's. And then if you're new, welcome. And I'm glad you can join us on this journey. So for today's agenda, we have, I'll do a quick introduction to myself for about 5 minutes or less. And then we'll get straight into forms of communication, and then we'll spend a good chunk of time on what are the 5 C's of communication. And then finally, we'll have Q&A at the end where you can submit your questions. And if you would like to submit questions, go ahead and write them down and go along the slides. And then towards the end, you can click on the left-hand side. There's a little button that says Q&A. If you click on that, you can put your question to me, and I will answer it verbally. So I will ask that you save your questions to the end. Let's get started. So about myself, I have a background in law and dispute resolution, and really I've had in terms of my background, so you get an idea of the different roles and the hats I've been lucky enough to play, to wear, I mean. And one of the first things I wanted to share was that I am a Chinmay Yuvavir from the first batch from 2004, and I also served on the Chinmay Mission Singapore Executive Board as a CHIC representative, and as a junior CHIC facilitator in Mission in Austin. I was also on the CHIC West board, and I took on the role of training and development coordinator on the CHIC West steering committee. And those are some of the things that I've done in my CHIC life. And then finally in 2013, I kind of retired from CHIC. I've had served the gamut of the age. And so the reflections I have today are really from my experiences, from trial and error, from the wisdom that I've gained from my acharyas and guides along the way. So I hope that this communication seminar will be a little bit different from something that you've already attended. I know many of you have and are already excellent communicators. This workshop on communication will be more from a perspective of chick and how it relates to chick and chinmay mission. And so it's going to be a little bit different. So let's get into the forms of communication. First, there's written that we're all familiar with today. Email is the most common. There's also text messaging, letters, still old fashioned, but still there. Letters, flyers, posters, social media, definitely, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or what have you. These are all written forms of communication. And I've kind of kept that separate from verbal because verbal really involves face to face, kind of interaction or, listening to the tone of the other person, which is phone. And then, of course, there's electronic communication, i.e., what we're doing right now. It's a webinar. There's FaceTime, there's Google Hangout, and so there's, technology has blessed us with a whole range of new types of communication. Of course, there's nonverbal communication, facial gestures, and in the electronic world, they've tried to replicate that by using emoticons with a smiley face over there. And then also, I encourage you to think about communication, nonverbal communication, in the form of silence. Silence sometimes, weighted silence, considered silence, can be a very powerful form of communication. In fact, sometimes it can achieve things that words cannot. So let's not, forget about silence. And the same with action. Slamming down something, slamming a door, walking away. These are all different types of action that communicate feelings and thoughts and opinions, though they're not necessarily verbal. So anybody want to take a guess about what percentage of communication is words? I mean, I think we spend a lot of time thinking about communication as verbal communication. So anybody want to kind of just have a mental idea of what that percentage is in your head? And according to a famous study, Dr. Albert Marabin, he studied communication and found that only 7% of communication is actually conveyed by words. And for some of you, that's really shocking. And then if you're thinking about, well, if not words, then, what else do people understand through communication? 38% of communication is actually conveyed by tone. And so if I were to say, yes, thank you, versus yes, thank you. I mean, you can see how the tone can completely change the face of that communication. Shockingly enough, 55% of communication is conveyed by body language. And if you think about what that means for us, when we, our sort of primary form of communication is email or texting, there's a big component missing. And so when we, work in a project like this in Chinmay Jyoti Yatra, which is a large scale, multi-party, multi-teams, people of, from different hierarchies working together, and how that communication is all kind of going to come together mostly, and a lot of it, because people are all over the country, you're going to have to be using, primarily email or text. Then you're going to have to think about what that means for your communication. So today's presentation will focus on key principles or key values of communication that we need to have when we work in a project such as this. I call this the 5 C's of communication. And, I use, like yesterday, I use this metaphor of a hand because, when these 5 come together, they form a fist that is to be reckoned with. It symbolizes strength. And so if we want strong communication, these are the components: clarity, concise, confidence, creativity, chain of command. These are the 5 different areas that we need to focus on. Give me a moment here. It looks like it does not want to show up. Give me a moment while I figure this out. Well, I'm going to go ahead and present from this, and then we can go back, to the full screen later on. And say the starting point is your goal, and then articulating accurately what you're seeking. So when you want to communicate, I mean, kind of ask yourself, hey, what do I want to convey to this person? And then what's the best way that I can convey what I want? I know this sounds very basic, but I sometimes feel that, when I read certain emails or, even phone conversations, I wonder, and after putting down the phone, I'm like, what does that person really want? So I think it's very important being very, very clear. What is your objective? And then in the next section, I'm going to focus on written communication. Now, if you're going to be, when you have written communication requesting an action, I suggest the following guidelines. Number one, have a relevant subject header. And so be specific. I want to say, avoid using a subject header like, hey, or, some stuff, or, things, or whatever. Because, when we want to search our email or our inbox for that particular email, it really does not narrow it down. I don't know, maybe some of you are doing a great job with your housekeeping for emails, but for instance, I know I don't. And sometimes when I want to uncover important points that were discussed in an email, it's really hard to find. And what would be easier, for everybody, is if we could state what the goal is, or state what the subject is in the subject header. And secondly, in your email or written communication, be clear about what's your goal here. What specific item do you want to accomplish? When would you like it done by? And who would you like it done by? And then, end off with a request for response by a due date, so that that person has some idea of the urgency of your email, whether you want it done by tomorrow, by next week, in the next couple of weeks. All this gives clear direction on what you want, when you want it done by, and an opportunity for the other person to respond. And then if you follow up written communication, I think at the minimum, it should include, a summary of the request. Some people, may not have, or they may have lost your earlier email. And so it's good to start off by talking about, hey, I had asked blah, 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 and then, make a second request, then revise it if needed, or, put in a little reminder for them. And then the last thing is, I would proceed on caution with this, kind of advise on a course of action in the event of non-response, is how I put it. If you, in the event that I, don't hear from you by this particular date, then, I will assume it is okay for me to proceed, or I will assume that, you don't want this to be done, etc. Now, that, again, I put caution in that, in 3C, because I think that needs to be used very sparingly, because sometimes it can seem like a threat, just depending on how it's worded. And we're not threatening. What we want to give is, a course of action that's clear in the event of non-response. So I would say leave that for really like a third or fourth kind of a reminder, and kind of just put it out there that, hey, if I don't hear back, I'm going to assume it's okay. So again, leave that to some of the later follow-up emails. I'm going to see if we can go back to full screen. All right. The next thing about written communication is answering to the point. So if somebody, asks you, hey, when can you get this done?
A response like, "Oh, that depends. I have a lot going on right now," doesn't really answer the question. This person is asking you for a time to revert. And so I would encourage kind of a more specific response. I mean, if you want to talk that you have a lot going on, you can say something like, given my current workload, I will aim to get this done, say by the end of the week, or by next week. But it's important to answer the question that is in the email. Again, it sounds really basic, but sometimes I feel that we're in such a rush, or the email from a certain person kind of elicits an emotional response from us that we don't read it very carefully. So I'm going to encourage you to be very clear about what is being asked of you, and then answer to the point. Transportation and logistics. Often communication involving transportation and logistics involves a lot of back and forth. In Chinmay Jyoti Yatra, this is going to be a very important aspect of communication, figuring out, when the Acharya will come, when certain activities are going to happen, looking at timeline, looking at, how the Jyoti, for instance, is going to be transported. And so when you deal with communication involving transportation and logistics, I can't emphasize enough to confirm is the final action plan. Because, whether, for instance, if you're arranging for somebody to be picked up, if that person, may think that somebody else is doing it, or there may be a last minute change of plans. And so always, for these two items, confirm what is the final plan of action so that you're clear about what needs to be done. I know some of you are going to kind of balk at this, especially, all you tweetsters or tweetmeisters, whatever you call yourselves. Like, imagine having to use your phone as a phone in this day and age. Sometimes I feel the best thing to do to just pick up the phone and call the person. And I feel that sometimes in email communication, perhaps it's because the tone is not conveyed, or, certain things are not answered directly, and then it gets confusing with the back and forth. Make a call. Just pick up the phone and call the other person to clarify what was meant. I feel that in my experience has saved a lot of confusion when I can just pick up the phone and talk to the person. I also think it's nice because it adds a personal touch. With so much email that we get these days, some of us actually miss using the phone or getting phone calls. And so when we do get a phone call, that's great. And it says that my communication is important, that I will call you, that I will reach out to you via phone. And I would also say to document important communication. While it's good to call a person, or text and that kind of thing, when it comes to very important points about the project, when you're getting approval, for instance, or when it concerns the budget, I think it's important to document that, and you can certainly do that via email. So even just sending a note to say you've had a conversation with somebody, say a board member or an acharya, about a certain issue. There's no harm in then following that up with an email to say, regarding our discussion today, to confirm that XYZ is the course of action, or XYZ has been approved. And so down the road, if there's any confusion about whether approval was given or not, you have something in writing that says you've done that. And I think, this really comes from my background of being a lawyer, where documentation is very important. I also encourage you to organize regular team meetings to ensure that all the team members have clarity about what's going on. So much can change from, even the preparation stages of a project, with new information, with new maybe budgetary constraints, with new action players. Things can change a lot, and sometimes things can change very quickly. if you don't have a way, and sometimes people are too busy to check their email or are inundated with email that they really can't track what's happening. For CamtraCon, when I worked on CamtraCon in 2012, what we did was we would set aside every Wednesday for the team to meet. And then, at first there wasn't that much, so we would, have maybe like, once in 2 weeks. I mean, we started with a kind of a 4-month window. So, initially, probably the first couple of months, it was maybe once in 2 weeks. And then as, heated up, we would meet every week. And, this is and so this is a good way to also kind of click with your team members. Hey, has this been done? Was this understood from the emails? What is the, and this is a good opportunity for also back and forth to make sure everybody's on the same page. And then finally, I would say that it's important to create a playbook. Now, this term is new to me. It may not be to many of you, but a playbook kind of outlines in sports. It outlines tactics or that that they're going to play, and here, we call it like a playbook because we're using a spreadsheet to start tracking the project, to start tracking the development of the project. And I'm going to go ahead and show you a sample of a playbook. And so this is the one we used from CamtraCon in 2012. So this, it has the planning team, it has what their role is, what their responsibilities are, whether it's been completed. And then we had different things that we were going to work on. So Ashram Seva, Acharya Seva. We also did a to-do list that, we did it in like immediately these things need to be done. And then, and this was also during the time that Swami Mitrananda was visiting the US and who was also involved in CamtraCon. And so we had a list of things to do. And then also, by the time we got to, these were the things that needed to be done. And so all of it was tracked with a due date. The item was specific. So if you look at it, it's not something general. It actually is very, very specific about the particular item. It also gives a due date. It gives who's the responsible party. And then its status. And that's typical for, if you want to be tracking action items. We had, again, there were housing arrangements, there was transportation, airport, program details. Let's scroll down here real quick. On scheduling, this is what our timetable looked like. We had workshop, plan the workshop topics. And this is great for when we work as a team because different people who have different roles can work on different tabs pretty much independently. The whole can, at a snapshot, figure out what's going on. So I highly encourage you to, oops, let me do that again. I highly encourage you to use the playbook as a way of organizing. Now let's see if this works. So we talked about answering to the point, transportation, phone call. And then finally, meeting with the respective board members to set expectations. I think this is not just a planning, but sort of maybe even a pre-planning to just, and we'll talk about this in just a little bit when we talk about working with board members, but I think it's very important to have an initial meeting to set out what the expectations are so that both you, your team, and the board member are on the same page. So the next aspect I'm going to look at is being concise. I know some of you are laughing at this word spiel, but so a spiel is basically, having a summary of the important details that you want to talk about. when you talk about this project or when you talk about this program, and to write it out, because you're going to be talking to so many people about this, whether it's the board member, whether it's people in the Chinmay Mission at your center, to others. And each time, instead of reinventing what you want to say about the project and possibly missing things out, I think prepare a spiel, prepare a summary of it and what you want to say, and make it interesting and exciting and appealing, so that people want to listen to it, and they also get the important details of the event are communicated to them. And here I've also put down some guidelines for written communication. I think it's very important to know your audience. So, who is this communication for? Does this person want details or want big picture? And if they want details, give only the salient details. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a very lengthy email. There are some people that, and again, I really want to emphasize knowing your audience, because there are some people that if you give a whole bunch of details, they'll say, stop, this is too much. I can't handle all this. Just give me the summary, give me the big picture. It's important to know how much information to give out. And then conversely, if they want they want all the minutes, for instance, if a board member is looking for all the minutes, then go ahead and give that to them. But it's important to know what is the expectation. Again, keep the subject header relevant so that it's easy to track the email later on. Speak to the point. We've talked about this earlier, answering to the point, but also speak to the point. Know what you want to communicate, and find a short way of talking about it. And then if you really have communication that needs to be disseminated, then consider having, a way to break it up. So for instance, having a section header. So if you're writing, say, a detailed email to, whether it's an acharya or whether it's, chicks that are attending, you can break it up into, transportation or, accommodation or, program, so that they can, sometimes if needed, they can skip to what they need to know, and then not have to kind of comb through the entire, 4-page, 5-page, whatever length of your letter or, written communication is. They can go to the parts of the letter that are important to them. I highly encourage using numbering, and this makes it very easy for reference. So instead of saying, on page 3, you had a paragraph that talked about, arriving at the center at this time. I mean, that's hard to refer to. Whereas if you number your paragraphs and you bullet them, then it's easy to say, paragraph 2D is, XYZ point, and I want to say, something about that. So it's very easy reference. And then if you, plan to give presentations about Chinmay Jyoti, I would say, or, an aspect of the program, I would say, use visual ways of presenting, because sometimes, people get bored by just words, and, having a snapshot of it really helps. It sticks in the memory much better than words do. For instance, so far, maybe one of the things that's stuck in your head in this webinar is the big old smiley face, the look of surprise emoticon. Even though I've written so much, that may be the one thing that stands out to you. And that just tells you the power of visual ways of presenting, the power of pictures. This section, I call it email communication to busy VIPs and, very important people. So I just kind of want to, put a caveat in this by saying that the first and foremost rule of communication with, kind of up the hierarchy is really knowing what that person wants. If that person wants more detail, then provide more detail. If the person doesn't, want as much, then go with less. But so, so I say, with whatever points that I'm going to cover right now, know that sort of the overarching rule is knowing your, acharya, your board member really well, and knowing what he or she would want to know. Um, and also I just want to say that some of you are, maybe more familiar with your acharyas or board members than others are. And so you might already have an established rapport with them, and you may already have an existing way of communication that works for them. Now, if it's working, don't fix it. I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But if you find some ideas in here that could enhance your communication, then certainly go ahead and use them. And of course, many of you are going to be working with your boards, your acharyas for the very first time. And so this is, you may get some good ideas from here. I would say make response easy for them by using an idea. So instead of asking open-ended questions like, so what is your opinion on, XYZ? I say go specific. Make it easy for them to say yes, no, or to counteroffer. So if you want to, instead of asking when can we have a meeting, suggest a meeting time and see if that works for them. Again, with some acharyas, or some board members, they may want more flexibility. But as a general rule, I would say, especially for those who are very busy, they don't have a lot of time to kind of sift through the information or, to kind of go through it in detail. So if it's easy for them to answer yes or no, or, propose a counter, they would much prefer that. And if you need the person to come up with a time frame or a proposal, or you're waiting for them to give you a write-up, and go ahead and propose a draft and ask them input, because sometimes it's easier, it takes less time for them to kind of edit a draft than to come up with something from scratch. It helps them save time. And if it's something that saves time for them, then I say go ahead and propose it to them. And with a caveat that if any changes are made, then you need to be okay with it. Don't have a like, oh my gosh, I spent so much time, working out this write-up, and then this person just redlined it all the way. Well, that's the purpose of a draft. It is just a tentative suggestion on, what the text is. So work without attachment and be okay with whatever changes that are made, or ask questions about certain changes that need to be done. Another thing that's helpful, and this is specifically in an email, is to highlight the urgent items in red. I've previously used kind of a color code, and this is, have an understanding with, with the acharya or with the board member, so that they're not kind of puzzled by your email in different colors. I would say, make it, talk to them about it before you do it, but suggest that maybe the urgent items can be in red, and then if you want to use, I've used blue, green, for less urgent. Within the next couple of weeks, have a time frame, and then color code the email so that they know which items they need to work on right away. And, and really not everything is going to be urgent. So if you can, I think they would really appreciate if you could give them a sense of what you need their input for at the earliest, and then what can wait for, a week, a few days, whatever your time frame is. Now, when you're writing a summary, it is very important, and again, this is when it comes to longer email communication, I say underline the action item, because like, look at the screen, for instance. There are a lot of points, a lot of important points. Now, one, by having color, it helps break up some of the text, and then underlining the action item actually makes it pop right out at you. So I would typically underline action items so that it's very clear about what needs to be done, and this is not just for your info but for your action. And finally, I'd say take initiative with action items. So be proactive. Ask them, do you want me to follow up with, XYZ? Should we do XYZ, or do you have a different plan? Again, be very flexible, so that, you're not dictating to them what needs to be done, but you're expressing your willingness to take initiative. And that's important. And I think that they will really appreciate that. Um, the next point, or the next aspect of communication, is confidence. And, both having confidence and expressing confidence are two aspects of this. I say knowledge is power. And by that, I mean it is important, in order to be an effective communicator, to know the stuff. When I say the stuff, I really mean the program details, the project details. And I believe you'll be given a manual about Chinmay Jyoti Yatra. I believe it will be distributed at the RPC that you're going to be attending. And it'll be given by the steering committee. So look out for that. And that will outline a lot of the need to know information, and also, resources that you're going to need for this project. Know your own playbook. Once you start your spreadsheet, have information at your fingertips and know it thoroughly. The second kind of knowledge is power is, knowing the recipient. What does the recipient want? And giving communication to giving communication that the recipient wants, not just that you want to communicate, but how do they want it received? Do they want the details, or do they want the big picture? And the last point on that is being thorough. So, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, and not being regular, about updating information is also a dangerous thing. So be very, very thorough. Know your playbook, know your manual inside out. And that will make you a much more powerful and effective communicator. The second point regarding confidence is, when in doubt, ask. Being confident is not just about knowing everything. There's probably some things that you're not going to know. And instead of pretending like just ask. And you have support. We'll talk about the support you can reach out to in just a little bit. But be be truthful to yourself, be truthful to others, and when you don't know, you say you don't know. Also, be very organized. I think that helps in confidence because, for instance, by creating a playbook, you're staying on top of the game. You're tracking and following up on action items. It's easy to do that when you're organized. You're staying on budget. That's another important aspect of being on board with the project. And then inspire confidence by doing the following in a timely manner. And here I've underlined and kind of bolded timely because that's key. It's not just getting information out eventually, it's about doing it when it's needed, giving communication when it's needed, where time is of essence. So whether it's answering your email communication, providing relevant updates on the project, being prepared for meetings, being punctual, being reliable, needs to be done, needs to be done when it needs to be done. And the last aspect of that is acting. It's not just about planning and preparation, it's about doing it. And so act when it's necessary. And another that is act on feedback, received feedback on whether medication is working or not working, then act on it to rectify it. I've included here a beautiful quotation from Puja Gurudev, who says, "Don't expect them." And so, sometimes when Gurudev writes these quotations, I feel like he's talking to me. And expect them could be, the board members you work with. It could be the Chinmay Mission family. It could be your team members. It could be, virtually just about anyone that you're maybe having a conflict with. Don't expect them to fully understand you. They won't. So demonstrate with results what they would not understand with words. And even Gurudev recognizes the importance of action. And he emphasizes that to us, that it's not enough to just talk about it. You must act. And so act when you need to act. And that's how you can inspire confidence. And the last aspect is, being respectful and compassionate when dealing with difficult people. Um, this is a way of, keeping the confidence that others have in you, by being respectful and compassionate, even when your hot buttons are pushed. And I love this beautiful quotation that Gurudev says, to live by. He says, in life, to handle yourself, use your head. So be logical, be, introspect ruthlessly. But to handle others, use your heart. So be compassionate about, somebody else's response to you. One of the penultimate ones is creativity. And this is going to be a very, very important aspect in the project, because the Chinmay Jyoti Yatra encompasses so many different programs that use different means. So you're going to have a play, you're going to have chanting. There's going to be different activities around, or during the 1 month that the Jyoti will be at the center. So when you're publicizing, kind of the rule of thumb that I say is always ask yourself, what's the best possible way to communicate this information? Is it social media? Is it via flyers? And what is that message that we can give to people that will make them sit up, that is appealing, that is compelling, that's easy to understand? So just at a glance, people know what is it that you're talking about, and what is it that you want them to be a part of. So it's not just, oh, let's just put it out there and, get it, they get it. That's not the attitude. The attitude is, what is the best possible way to communicate this? Another aspect of publicity that I want to talk about is inspired creativity. So this is about digging deep within yourself and drawing from your own spiritual background and expressing that. So that, whether it's in the design or whether it's in, sort of the catchy messages that you use, draw from spirituality and make a link so that people, understand the depth of this event, of this program, of this activity, by couching it in spirituality. And then the last aspect is knowing your resources. So know that you have a lot of support and reading material out there that can spark your creativity. So when you're stuck, when you feel stuck, reach out. There are plenty of people to help you and support you. And then read something inspiring, or whether it's a Chinmay Jyoti Yatra manual, or whether it's reading Gurudev's books. Something will jump out at you, and it will spark creativity that you can then bring to publicity. And then another area that creativity can be used is in management and problem solving. So whenever you feel like a situation is impossible, think, I'm possible. Think that there is a way out, and you just have to get creative about it. If something feels like, if a door feels like it's been shut in your face, find another door, find a different exit. There is one. It just involves kind of, to use a trite term, thinking out of the box. And then I also encourage you to use the range of communications when you're stuck. So, sometimes, a smile or even silence can accomplish more than a lengthy email or lengthy instructions. And that's all it really takes. So think about communication, not just in the form of email, but in what else can I do? How else can I convey this? And get really creative. And the last aspect I want to say is, proceed with compassion. That again, this is Gurudev's quote, faults become thick when love is thin. When you're handling people, when you're handling problems, I think it's important to operate from a place of love. And from a place of love is also where creativity flows. So when you tap into that, you're opening up a new aspect and a new aspect of yourself, and a new way that you can better communicate. The final aspect of the 5 C's is, or the final aspect of communication, and the last of the 5 C's is chain of command. Now, here I'm sharing with you the structure, sort of the management structure, if you will, of the Chinmay Jyoti Yatra, where you're going to have, most of you will be reporting to the Joy, the Jyoti Yatra core. And I've listed the names of the people and then also the contact information. And don't worry about taking notes, because I mean you'll have this information. This is from the manual that's going to be distributed. But I want to show you, kind of, when I talk about the chain of command, how this is structured, to where you need to know who reports to whom. And that's an important aspect, because when we're talking about a national scale project with different centers, different teams, and different, sort of coordinating regions, we need to make sure that the communication reaches the right person. And either, it doesn't go to, not just going to the wrong person, but going to the wrong level of communication, to the wrong level of hierarchy. And so know the management structure, and not just for Chinmay Jyoti Yatra, but also, this point relates also to knowing your center's board. Who's on the board? How is the board structured? And then know who to send your program queries. Now, program queries, you will send it to chickwestjy@gmail.com. But, you also need to know, when it comes to your board, who is your point of contact. And then, know and build rapport with your program contact. So, if you haven't already been introduced, go ahead and introduce yourself. That person knows that, you're going to be starting a relationship together for the project. The next aspect is following protocol. So this is very key for any kind of large-scale project. And, it's not just a cultural thing. I think it makes communication flow so much better when there is protocol for, who to approach, what issues to approach to whom. When people stick to that protocol, I think it makes communication a little easier. And then also on the flip side of that is knowing when and how to escalate a matter. I encourage a lot of caution using CC. So this is, when you carbon copy somebody on an email. Some people do that pretty indiscriminately. People who don't need to be on certain emails are on certain emails, and then they think they have to, take certain action. Or some people are missing on the CC. They should have done the CC because they needed to have known that this particular communication was going on. So I think it's very important to have this discussion, and maybe a good time to do this is at your RPT, when you meet your acharyas, to know when certain matter does not get addressed or serious comes up, and the person you're supposed to be going to taking notice or is not taking action. Then what do you do? And so be aware that using CC is a very, it's a very, I'm trying to think of a good metaphor. It's like a sword. It can do good, it can do harm. So use it very carefully. And then, the last aspect of that is kind of being approachable and respectful. When we in a team like this, when we work in a hierarchy, I think, it goes without saying that we have to be respectful, because everybody has certain roles that they're playing and certain value that they bring to the overall structure. It's just like, building blocks, or, building a house with certain, the foundational bricks, and then, the next level, and then the third, and then finally the roof. So everybody has a role to play, and it's important to, to be aware of that. And then just being approachable, because when you're working in a team, when you're working in a hierarchy, people need to know that they can come to you with questions. Whether you're a team member, whether you're a platoon member, a squadron member, a squadron leader, it is important to, being approachable opens up the channels of communication. And if they know that they can approach you, then they're more likely to come to you with questions and that you can clarify, and that smoothens the path of communication. So the last slide I have today is guidelines for working with CM boards. These are some of the suggestions that I have. Now, again, some of you may already know your board members really well, and then this may or may not benefit you. But if you've never worked with a Chinmay Mission board before, and you're just kind of like, oh, where do I even start? My suggestion is to start by requesting if you can kind of do a meet and greet, so that your board members know who you are, know who's your team, and know who they can go to for questions. And then also, I believe you'll be having a CHIC representative from, one of the board members will be a CHIC representative that will work with you on this specific project. And so, it's good to set up a conversation with them to discuss, kind of, and again, don't leave this to, very sort of a crucial time where, deadlines are looming. Start this early, where you have a conversation. What is this overall program? What is their preferred means of communication? Some people will say, just email me. Or some people will say, it's just easier if you call me, so just reach me by phone. And then also, do they want minutes? Do they, from your team meetings, do they just want to have a conversation? What is their preference? And then also find out, what is the preferred frequency, and then the type of updates. So how often are they expecting you to give them an update? Some people are just, only when you need my help, and reach out to me. And then some others will be saying, no, I want to know what's going on at every stage. So whenever you have a team, I want to read the minutes. Again, it's a very fine line to balance, with inundating somebody with information and then not giving them any at all. So I would say check in with them about how they want to receive their updates. How often, whether it's a big picture or the details. And then also, it's a good conversation to have about who to CC on email communication. There are some CHIC representatives may want to be CC'd on all communication, and then some people say, no, don't do that. Just on very important ones, or just where you need my input. Go ahead and CC me that. So go ahead and clarify this. This is very important. And then also talk about what are the expectations, what expectations they have of the team, and also maybe just ask, or request certain things that you would like them to come on board with. Just have a sharing session about expectations. And then, another good topic for discussion may be the budget. And I'm going to leave this, a little ambiguous, because I think different boards handle this matter differently. And so it's just, start the conversation and then see, and then guidance on this particular topic, the budget. And then finally, be prepared to give regular updates regarding the project. I have found that, PowerPoint presentation slides usually capture the main points. It prevents me from rambling. So, I encourage it. If you don't have to attend a board meeting and, make a formal presentation, maybe you don't do this. But a good suggestion, I think, is, kind of make it easier to read rather a lengthy brief. So consider using that. And then the last point I'll make is that it's important to document communication with board member, not just board members, but also any kind of important communication is best documented. So even if you, like I said earlier, have verbal communication on an issue, if it's important enough, document it so that in future you can come back and check, because everybody forgets, and everything, things change also. So when you have some sort of a paper trail, it helps you get back to the original intention. So I just kind of wanted to do a quick visual of the phases of a project. There's the preparation phase, there's the execution, and then there's follow-up. And so if you think about, where does communication fit into this? Is it in the arrows? Is it like within the box? I say that communication really is what holds all of this together. It's a vessel. It keeps things fluid. It keeps things going. It keeps things dynamic. And so it's very important. It's important pre-preparation communication. It's important post follow-up. I can't emphasize how it's important to follow these guidelines for communication throughout the process. And now we have some time for Q&A, and I'm going to go ahead and see if there are any questions. Can I just check to see? I see a question that says you cannot see the slides. Now, have you not seen any of, or was it just a particular slide? The person that asked me the question about the slides, can you please tell me if you saw any of the slides or not? Missed the first few, but got back on track from clarity. Okay. Okay, good. So you did see the slides. Okay, excellent. Did you have any questions on anything? Okay, also know that, if you have questions or later on as you reflect on this, you can always ask it. Forward your questions to chickwestjy@gmail.com, and they'll forward me the questions. Or if they're able to answer, they'll go ahead and send you an answer as well. And I'm just going to wait for one more minute. I leave you with this quote from Gurudev, who says that in all worth undertakings, there will be risks of failure, of disappointments, of even disaster. To face them all with inner poise and firm faith is to discover the glory of the final tree. And here there's some beautiful qualities, for communication that we can glean from Gurudev's quote. facing it. So being courageous. And this is from yesterday's lecture on leadership, facing them. And then the other aspect of it being inner poise. Know that this is also your journey of, evolving as a leader, as a communicator, and then having the firm faith in the goal. Then you will discover the glory of the final victory. So with this beautiful quotation, I thank you for joining me. And like I said, if you have questions, you're welcome to send them to chickwestjy@gmail.com. And then we'll go ahead and close with our prayers. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Hari Om, everyone.